him come here and to testify. The amendment that has been put forward requests that. The sub-amendment that has been put forward requests that a list of speakers be made available to the clerk, then to this committee, and to the ethics commissioner. My question is, as the chair of this committee, is it in the public's best interest that this would take place? Because ultimately, this committee is responsible to assess the actions and take on other studies having to do with public office holders and their conduct. And we do that not for our own sake, but for the sake of the Canadian public. And in this case, we are looking at just over $900 million that was committed to by the Prime Minister of this country and his cabinet. And that money was to be given to an organization to run a youth volunteer program. That $900 million is public funds. That is taxpayer money from the Canadian people. Therefore, I would surmise that the Canadian public does in fact have an interest in how that money was utilized. It has been suggested by the members of this committee, not all, by some members of this committee, that some of that money that was incorporated in that, not that was incorporated in the 900 million, but in previous interactions with We Charity, that some of that money, which also was public money, may have been used to fund the members that are on the speaking list that has been requested. Again, because that is public money, it is in fact in the interest of the Canadian public to understand how that money was used. That said, I will make my decision in the interest of Canadians from coast to coast. And I believe that what is in their best interest is full transparency. I vote yay. At this point, we move to a discussion on the amendment to the original motion. I would have the clerk then read out the amendment which has now been amended. And then I will continue with discussion in just a moment, Mr. Fergus, if you may.
Madam Chair, I regret to do this.
Are you raising a point of order?
I am going to raise a point
of
order.
Sure, Mr. Fergus, go ahead.
Thank you. And thank you very much, Madam Chair, for outlining your reasons for making the decision that you have made. I will be challenging the decision of this chair. And the reason why I'll be challenging this decision of this chair, Madam Chair, first of all, let me thank you for laying out your reasons. You didn't have to, and you did. But I think the chair, I would respectfully submit that the chair should have taken a look at of the Green Book, as you quoted it, section 609. Sorry, is it 608 or 609? I think it's 609. Where it says the chair, of course, as you just said, is not bound to give reasons for his or her vote and is free to vote either way. However, when bills being studied, the chair of legislative standing committees normally vote in such a way as to maintain the status quo or to keep the matter open for further discussion, just as the speaker would do in similar circumstances in the House. That is that is the only reference, again, to what we're doing. And so I would argue, and I will argue, as I do challenge the chair, that this does not permit the status quo, but indeed is breaking new ground for the Ethics Committee.
Mr. Fergus, I'm sorry. Thank you. Because it's not a ruling, it's actually a vote. In the same way that you wouldn't be able to challenge the vote of anyone else around this table, you are not able to actually challenge my vote as the chair.
Can I have a ruling by the clerk on that? I thought that just looking at that part of the procedure, which deals with what happens when there is a tie vote, and what happens, in the conditions in which that a chair would actually cast a vote, a committee chair would cast a vote.
Well, if you just give me a moment, I'll ask the clerk.
Please, thank you.
Mr. Fergus, the clerk has declined to speak to this. However, it is confirmed that it is in fact a vote and not a ruling, and so unfortunately I'm not able to sustain your comments. Thank you. Mr. Kurek.
So I hesitate to bring up the speaking list in light of your comments earlier. However, I am curious, and partly I admit my relative youth in terms of my time in Parliament. I was on the speaking list when I moved the sub-amendment. Does that mean my time has expired, or do I have the opportunity to once again address? And I'll simply ask that simple question for clarification.
Mr. Kurek, thank you. So in just a moment, we will proceed to discuss the amendment. And according to my speakers list, Mr. Kurek, because you did last have the floor under the amendment, and the only reason why it went from you to others is because we entered into a discussion with regards to the sub-amendment, you are still technically at the top of my list with regards to the amendment. So it would come back to you. Now, that stated, maybe just before we get going in terms of our discussion on the amendment, Mr. Green, I see your hand, just a moment. Just before we get started on that, I will ask the clerk to read out the amendment as it now stands with the sub-amendment as a part of it.
Thank you. The amendment as amended reads as follows. That the motion be amended by adding after the words 1 week of the adoption of this order, the following. And that the clerk provide these records to the members of the committee and the ethics commissioner for study, and that this committee calls upon Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to appear to give testimony relating to these matters.
Mr. Green, are you wanting to be added to the speakers list, or yes? Okay, no problem. You are already on there. So I will just review the speakers list before we continue forward. We have Mr. Kurek, Mr. Barrett, Mr. Angus, Mr. Green, Madam Shanahan, Mr. Fergus, Madam Gaudrau, Mr. Kurek. Oh, no, you're at the top, not the bottom. All right. With that, we will continue. The floor is yours, Mr. Kurek.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I will truly keep my my remarks brief and simply say I believe that the issue that we have at hand, it would be in the benefit of all for it to be moved expeditiously through these proceedings, so that we can not only get on with the further debate of this motion, but to ensure that Canadians are getting the answers that I believe, and as I've mentioned before, that my constituents remind me on a regular basis, believe that they should be getting. And I would reference again some of the comments that were made in the last committee meeting, and it's that you cannot do indirectly what you would do directly. It was Mr. Fergus that made those comments, and I believe that that is absolutely true. And certainly, in the most transparent way possible, I would submit to all members of this committee, and those, I'm sure, the many who are watching these proceedings on Facebook and Parleview and whatever else the case might be. I clearly believe that Canadians deserve and demand answers on this, and that any action otherwise is doing indirectly what I would simply ask the members opposite to state clearly what their intent is in a delay. So with that, I would close my comments and simply say, let's get on with it. Let's get Canadians the answers they deserve so that we can move on to ensure that that trust that I referred to in my opening comments can be once again work towards that hard work of restoring trust in our institutions that need to be treated with such care that we can work hard to restore that trust and get the answers that Canadians deserve. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Kurek. The next two speakers are Mr. Barrett and Mr. Angus, who, sorry, that is based on the first speaking list, so he is no longer here with us today, so I will take him off. So it is Mr. Barrett and then Mr. Green, starting with Mr. Barrett.
Okay, thanks, Madam Chair. I won't go on long. We're into hour 6 on this motion, and so we're on an amendment to the motion. And very much echo Mr. Kurek's comments. The situation changes almost by the hour with respect to new information that comes forward. So the will of the committee on the sub amendment was expressed, and so as I said at our last meeting, having heard from colleagues that there is certainly. There's certainly enough said that we can get to taking a vote. So, with that, I will conclude my remarks. However, to pick up on where Mr. Green was before, if it looks like the speakers list will just be populated until we exhaust our room booking here today, I may make further interventions in hope that we do bring this amendment to a vote and the main motion to a vote. Certainly before the end of the hour. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Mr. Green, you are next on the speaking list. Following Mr. Green, we have Madam Shanahan.
So you'll recall that in my conversations around the sub-amendment, I was fairly clear about wanting to kind of get to the heart of the matter. We have an opportunity. We've certainly discussed this at length, and I think it'll be interesting to see how this conversation develops from here in terms of whether we're going to be in another filibuster situation or whether we're just going to call the question. And so I'd like to test the will of the committee and call the question on this motion and just get to the vote.
Mr. Green, thank you. I understand your enthusiasm and your desire to do that in the interest of time and, of course, in the interest of the Canadian public. However, at this time, I'm not able to accept that. Thank you.
That's fair. I have a comfortable chair. Thank you.
Madam Shanahan, you are up next, and then following you is Mr. Fergus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have to say that I am disappointed with how this situation is evolving, given the very, I think, important discussions that we had at our first meeting around how this committee would conduct itself, and last Friday, in that personal documents of individuals should be handled with the utmost of care, in all confidentiality and in privacy. I think that's part of the work that we are here to uphold, actually. And so I would move a sub-amendment that any examination of personal documents by this committee be done in camera.
Madam Shanahan, specifically, you are speaking about the documents that would be a part of the speakers list requested by this amendment, or sorry, by the motion.
Yes, and just to clarify, it's documents that we're asking for, not a speakers list. Oh, from
That is the document
Yes,
that is being referred to is
okay.
the speakers list.
okay, so that yes, that any examination of those documents by this committee be done in camera.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Shanahan. At this time, then, we will move to debating the sub-amendment by Madam Shanahan. Mr. Kurek, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I believe that this the sentiment being expressed by the member opposite has been discussed lengthily, so I would simply suggest that we move forward to a vote as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Kurek. Mr. Fergus.
Encore une fois, Madame la Présidente,
Once again, Madam Chair, I do not agree with the decision of the committee concerning the sub-amendment for reasons that I've very well explained already, so I won't repeat that. I believe that we're making a grave mistake because I don't know where this will end when we start asking for documents concerning the legal past of a member, or if we talk about the business past of a member of parliament to know what someone did in the past, if it has even small relationship with the government. So I think that we're creating a very bad precedent. I remain opposed to what we're doing now. I'm still in favor, and I was ready to support giving this information directly to the Commissioner for Ethics and Conflicts of Interest, because he's the one who does that type of examination. But where will this all end? This is a good question. And this runs the risk of ruining the reputation of honorable people or the reputation of their friends or family members. And I think that this should be left to the Commissioner for Ethics. Nobody can say that this Commissioner will hesitate in confronting the power, the government. For 2.5 years, he has shown, since he's been appointed, he has shown that he does not hesitate. He does not hesitate in any way to make a decision or to share his opinion and conclusions following an investigation. And it's better for him to do that instead of us. Asking politicians to supervise other politicians, where will that end? And can we be assured that we will be totally disinterested when we make that kind of study? It's a bad idea. Despite of all that, despite of the decision made by the committee, it is certain that I will continue asking questions regarding this, because I really do not agree with this. But if we want to limit the damages, the least thing that we can do is, as it was agreed when we created that committee in this parliament in February, at least the least that we could do is to have a discussion in private, in camera, to make sure that we won't go too far. Well, we're already going too far, but that we won't abuse our responsibilities. So this is what I'm pleading to you. We should limit this and keep that information in camera. So this way, at least, if we can limit the damages that we run the risk of causing, that's what I would do. So I support the sub-amendment of my colleague.
Seeing no other speakers, then we will move to a vote. The vote then is that the any examination of the speakers list would be done in camera. If the clerk wouldn't mind just reading it officially.
The sub-amendment reads, and that any examination of personal documents by this committee be done in camera.
Okay. Okay.
It's following the...
So any examination of personal documents would be done in camera?
Any examination of those documents, or the documents that we're referring to in the motion, be done in camera. Of these documents?
The documents referred to?
Sure. Does that work? In the documents referred to by the motion?
Referred to, be done
in camera.
in camera.
Okay. Good. You may. I'll ask the clerk to conduct the vote.
So all those in favor, please say yay when your name is called. All those opposed, please say nay when your name is called. Madame Bruyère. Madame Lalonde. Mr. Fergus.
Oui.
Mr. Vaughan.
Oui. Yes.
Madame Shanahan.
Oui.
Mr. Barrett.
No.
Monsieur Gould.
No.
Mr. Kurek.
No.
Madame Gaudrau.
No.
Mr. Green.
Yes.
On the sub-amendment delivered by Ms. Shanahan, we have 6 voting yes and 4 voting no. Therefore, Ms. Shanahan's sub-amendment stands. Moving then on to the amendment, Madam Shanahan, the floor is yours.
On to the amendment. Can you read it again for me, please? I'm sorry.
Sure. So I will have the clerk read the amendment now with 2 sub-amendments added to it.
So the amendment reads, that the motion be amended by adding after the words 1 week of the adoption of this order the following, and that the clerk provide these records to the members of the committee and the ethics commissioner for study, and that any examination of this committee of the documents referred to be done in camera, and that this committee calls upon Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to appear to give testimony relating to these matters.
Okay, thank you, Madam Shanahan. My speakers list then is Mr. Fergus and then Madam Gaudrau. Mr. Fergus.
Madam Speaker, Madam Chair, I'll engage in a direct comment. I will be, even with this amendment, I still think it is the wrong move for us to make, and I will be voting against the amendment and then the main motion if it were to pass.
Thank you, Mr. Fergus. Moving down, we have Madam Gaudrau, and then following her, we have Mr. Vaughan.
Given what we've talked about, given what we've reflected amongst each other, given what we've shared, I think the time has come. I think we're ready to vote. I won't say any more.
Thank you, Madam Gaudrau. Mr. Vaughan.
Yeah, I would just, I'll be voting against it. I think the notion of a parallel investigation concerns me deeply. The integrity of the Integrity Commissioner and the work that independent officer of Parliament does, I think, is profoundly important. And the idea that be competing opinions on interpretation of evidence simultaneously as that independent officer goes forward, I just think is wrong. And I think it undermines, as I said, a very strong ethical framework that Parliament has put in place to hold us accountable, because we know that that's unfortunately a necessary part of any parliamentary process. I wish it weren't true. The issue that is in front of us is how to, I would hope, make the ethical framework and the rules of conflict of interest and the rules of integrity clearer and stronger, so that future parliamentarians are framed with an independent and a principled way of finding information, assessing facts, and if necessary, taking action to hold members accountable. It was a deliberate decision of past parliaments not to have parliamentarians do this for good reasons, and I am deeply concerned about this. I don't think it's inappropriate to have the Prime Minister here, as I said in my comments, to answer questions as to what's happened. That's not the point I was making. The point I was making, and the concern I had, and the concern I still have with what's being decided here today, is this notion of a simultaneous parallel process to the Integrity Commissioner. What happens if this committee reaches a separate set of conclusions than the Integrity Commissioner? What does the Integrity Commissioner do? Have we not undermined the independence of that office? And I think we need to think about that, not in the context of the current timetable or current framework in which we sit, but I think we need to think about that in the context of the next situation that comes along. Do we want independent oversight of parliamentary processes as they relate to both cabinet members and backbenchers, any member elected to the House of Commons? Or are we going to constantly have a committee which will be able to call a member, accuse a member, demand evidence of the member, display that evidence to the public, and then reach a conclusion that has no consequence whatsoever because the Integrity Commissioner hasn't been involved? There's a reason why the opposition parties went to the Integrity Commissioner first, because that's the process. That's the appropriate process. And that's the process we've agreed to as parliamentarians. We're changing that today. And we're not changing it based on strengthening an overall ethical framework. or accountability mechanisms. We're changing it because there's information in the public realm, and there is a political opportunity to exploit that in a committee setting. Let's be frank about it. And of course, you're going to get pushback from a political perspective, but I'm not speaking here from a political perspective or from a partisan perspective. I'm speaking here as a parliamentarian who takes the issue of ethics and accountability extraordinarily seriously. And I support wholeheartedly the notion of an independent office of parliament doing this work. There are all kinds, and history has shown us there are pitfalls to politicizing accountability instead of strengthening it. And this committee's job is not to go after members of parliament. It's to set the rules by which parliamentarians are held accountable. And the decision of past parliaments was to very, very clearly put that in the hands of an independent integrity commissioner. And I have the confidence in that commissioner, and certainly over my experience as a parliamentarian over the last 6 years have seen, that they have the capacity and the fortitude to speak truth to the power that parliamentarians hold and to hold us accountable through that process. And I have confidence in that, and I have a great deal of concern about the way in which this committee is reinterpreting its mandate, and in particular, the notion that there should be a parallel accountability process that could look very different from the one that gets delivered to us by the Integrity Commissioner, whose job it is to do a non-political, non-partisan interpretation of fact, present findings to Parliament, and then move forward with the accountability measures. I support, as I said, getting all the information to the Integrity Commissioner. I think that's fundamental to a good decision. But I don't support simultaneously delivering it to other groups of parliamentarians so they can go off and do their work in different committees. And so I have a great deal of reservation as to some of the decisions being made here today, irrespective of which party we're talking about, irrespective of what issue we're talking about, from a process, from an ethical process, from a legal process is how we're handling this issue. And I just will end with this. God help you if you find yourself in a situation where parliamentarians are suddenly swirling around your behavior, and you no longer have access to an independent ethics commissioner. Instead, it's just a partisan committee. That is not a good practice to be establishing, and I have made my point.
Thank you, Mr. Vaughan. Mr. Fergus, you are last on the speaking list.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I spoke a little precipitously. I will be voting for the sub-amendment, but for the amendment, but I'll be voting against the main motion in the end.
Thank you, Mr. Fergus. Excellent. Seeing no other speakers, I will move to a vote on. Yes, I will move to a vote on the amendment. At this point in time, I will ask the clerk to read the amendment as it stands and then proceed to a vote.
That the motion be amended by adding after the words 1 week of the 1 week of the adoption of this order the following, and that the clerk provide these records to the members of the committee and the ethics commissioner for study, and that any examination by this committee of the documents referred to be done in camera, and that this committee calls upon Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to appear to give testimony relating to these matters. All those in favor, please say yay. All those opposed, please say nay when I call your name. Madame Brière, Madame Lalonde, Mr. Fergus, Mr. Vaughan,
Oui, yes.
Madame Shanahan,
Oui.
Mr. Barrett,
Yes.
Monsieur Gould,
Oui.
Mr. Kurek,
Yes.
Madame Gaudrau.
Oui.
Mr. Green.
Yes.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, based on the vote that was just taken with regards to the amendment, all 10 members of this committee vote yay. At this point in time, we will proceed to our discussion of the motion as it stands amended. I will now have the clerk, who has been so gracious to us, I might add, read the motion with the approved amendment. Once the clerk does that, the speaking list that has been preserved from last day is as follows. Madame Gaudrau, Mr. Kurek, Mr. Fergus, Madame Briere, and Madame Shanahan. Sure.
Could you share with me what the procedure would be following this vote?
Following the vote on the motion?
So I'm assuming that there'll be the debate on the motion with the speaking list that you have just outlined.
Yes.
Then I'm assuming that we'll come to question. What will happen subsequent to it coming to question?
Well, Mr. Fergus, I'm not able to tell you where that vote will land. But once the vote is completed, which is what I'm assuming you're asking, once the vote is completed, then if the motion passes, then of course this committee would have the responsibility to determine a witness list and so forth. We would move forward. The clerk, of course, would call for those documents as outlined in the motion. However, of course, if this motion does not pass, then you are all free to go on your way, and that's that.
The reason why I asked, Madam Chair, is that given that we have passed the time that was scheduled for a regular business meeting, and of course there was a motion on the table, so it needs to be considered.
Correct.
Following that motion, would there be an automatic adjournment? And moving to the subcommittee or subcommittee business that was also planned to be taking place starting at 6 p.m.
It is to the will of the committee.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I'm reading the main motion as amended. That pursuant to Standing Order 1083H, the committee review the safeguards which are in place to avoid and prevent conflicts of interest in federal government procurement, contracting, granting, contribution, and other expenditure policies, and that to provide a case study for this review, an order of the committee do issue to Speaker Spotlight for a copy of all records pertaining to speaking appearances arranged since October 14th, 2008 for Justin Trudeau, Sophie Gregoire Trudeau, Margaret Trudeau, and Alexandra Trudeau, including, in respect of each speaking appearance, an indication of the fee provided, any expenses that were reimbursed, and the name of the company, organization, person, or entity booking it, provided that these records shall be provided to the clerk of the committee within 1 week of the adoption of this order, and that the clerk provide these records to the members of this committee and the ethics commissioner for study, and that these documents, and that any examination by this committee of the documents referred to be done in camera, and that the committee calls upon Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to appear to give testimony relating to these matters.
Thank you. Madame Gaudrau, the floor is yours.
Quel bonheur.
How lovely to be able to speak so much but in such short intervals. If I understand correctly, we have taken the time to look at all angles what's going on, and given that unanimously we've succeeded in moving forward, I have a wish, my wish, because we are also human beings, my wish is to have openness in deliberations before we vote. But please, I think we could bring something new to the table and not say again what has already been said at our last 2 meetings. I know we're able to do that. And I'd like to give up my time because I'm ready to vote.
Moving down the speakers list, we have Mr. Kurek.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I too would acknowledge the breadth of which the discussion has already taken place, and would cede my time in order to proceed to a vote.
Thank you, Mr. Kurek. My next speakers then are Mr. Fergus, Madame Briere, and Madame Shanahan. Mr. Fergus.
Madam Speaker, thank you very much once again. I will once again raise my opposition to what we're doing, and I think I have parliamentary reasons to support this. When you take a look at the selected rulings of Speaker Milliken, you will find a number of rulings which would indicate, several examples that would indicate of committee reports that are exceeding the scope of their committee's mandate. You can find those rulings, Madam Speaker, as it was brought to my attention over this weekend, from pages 774 to pages 799, of a number of rulings that Speaker Milliken had issued, saying when committees have exceeded their mandate. I won't review them here. I won't waste your time. But I think it is really important that when you take a look at those rulings, you'll see that all of them talk about what is the mandate of this committee. And it is really important, and I'd like to point out near the end of that selection of readings on page 778, he says, like all other powers of standing committees, a power to report is limited to issues that fall within their mandate or that have been specifically assigned to them by the House. In other words, Madam Chair, the mandate of the committee limits not only the scope of the committee's report, but its study, but also the scope of its power to send for persons and papers. We are exceeding our mandate here today. Now, Madam Chair, I know you did not issue a ruling. I would request that perhaps you may want to take a minute to confer with the clerk, but based on that citation, I would love to have a ruling from the chair as to whether or not you think that this main motion, if it should pass, be considered, does it fall within or without, inside or outside of the mandate of this committee?
Mr. Fergus, thank you. That has been brought to my attention, my own attention actually, due diligence on my own part as chair. And I have conferred with the clerk and done my own research. And I appreciate you referencing those pages. I trust that that's from the 2017 edition.
Well, this time we the selected decisions of Speaker Middleton, so it's not necessarily the House of the rules of procedure from 2017. It's actually
but from his decisions.
It's
awesome.
From his...
That's good clarification. Thank you. And so, having reviewed that, I would say that this motion is in fact within the scope of this committee.
So that would be your ruling.
I haven't been asked to rule on this.
I will be asking that you would rule on this in light of the selected readings of Speaker Milliken, pages 774 to 799.
Just give me one moment.
Thank you.
We're just going to suspend for one moment, please. Thank you.